Yet, according to this recent poll, is life meaningful without belief in God? 61% in France say yes, 57% in Britain, 59% in Germany, 67% in Japan. Thus, non-religious people have contributed enormously to the modern world, and they constitute hundreds of millions of people worldwide. Interesting that many of these democratic countries have a high quality of life, less crime, and less violence than in the United States. Indeed, one can even argue that religion is often an impediment to morality. Now, I do recognize, of course, that religions do have positive consequences, and they may give consolation, indeed they do, and hope to people, and they can arouse charitable instincts and goodwill. But on the other hand, religion often has negative consequences. Many people say, if you don't believe in God, then you cannot be good. What do you mean by God? The definitions differ. From the fatherhood of God, you can deduce contradictory moral imperatives. For example, are you for monogamy? Catholics are for monogamy and against divorce. Protestants are for monogamy and for divorce. Are you for polygamy? Muslims are for polygamy. Yet all three claim to believe in God. Do you believe in capital punishment? The Catholic bishops of the United States are against it. Virtually all the Western democracies are against it, yet Protestant fundamentalists, President Bush, and Muslims are for capital punishment. And so you can go down the list. Do you believe in birth control and contraception, euthanasia? What is the position of women and gays? And you find that the religions disagree basically. Now, if you then reject religious commandments as a basis for a belief in God, where do you turn? I think that the humanist, and ever since the Renaissance, humanism has been developing. The humanist believes that happiness here and now is our basic good, not salvation in the afterlife or the next life. This life is not simply a preparation for some future eternal immortality. It is good in itself, and so we ought to seek creative joy. We ought to actualize our potentialities. We ought to achieve excellence. For the secular humanists, life is meaningful. What is the meaning of life, says the theist, without God? Life presents us with opportunities. The meaning of life is what we invest. We are in control of our own destiny. Self-determinism is very, very important. Thus, there is a kind of autonomy of the moral consciousness. It is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness of every individual that we seek. Not only of every individual, but of a social good. And so, secular humanists and non-believers who believe in ethics believe that responsibility is very important, our responsibility to others. They're keenly aware of our responsibility to our children, our parents, our sisters and brothers, our relatives, our colleagues, members of our community, our country, and indeed also to the planetary habitat which we occupy and to the principles of social justice. Now, I submit that human beings are potentially moral, that the nature of the human being is such that he or she is capable of performing moral behavior and of making moral choices, of being good and right. This depends, of course, upon social conditions. It depends upon moral education. And so it's very important that we cultivate and nourish in the young the capacity for morality. Under these conditions, it is possible to develop a sense of empathy for other human beings, a caring feeling for other human beings. And as we proceed in life, we see that there are moral dilemmas that we face, that we cannot depend on absolute principles which are inviolable and unchangeable according to many religions, but that what we do depends on the context and the situations in which we make choices. In other words, what we ought to do depends upon a rational investigation of the alternatives and a choice or decision in the light of the consequences. Young children learn what they ought and ought not to do, and they learn from experience. And adults learn from experience. And so there is a developed moral sensibility that does not depend upon authority or mere commandment, but is able to make choices in the light of a rational investigation. Often our choices are difficult. Often we face problems, and there is a choice not between good and bad, right and wrong, but between two goods or two evils. And so morality is very basic to the whole human condition. And a morally developed person is sensitive to the nuances, to the difficulties, and the problems that we face. And his choice grows out of lived experience. You can never rest upon absolute principles handed on down. You have to rest in the last analysis upon the development of a kind of reflective intelligence. You live and you learn by living. You live and learn and change in the light of experience. And that is particularly true in the modern world, where social change is so rapid, where there is a class of cultures, where different religious traditions are at odds with each other, and where there are no easy solutions. And so what better method than a method of rational inquiry, where we weigh alternatives in the balance? What better method than a method of negotiation and compromise, where we try to understand the point of view of the other person, and where we try to work out, as best we can, principles that seem adequate for the current world? I submit that we cannot look back to the ancient documents, the Bible or the Koran. We cannot look back to our nomadic and rural forebears who wrote those eloquent documents that expressed the experience of that age, the scientific, the literary, and the moral outlook. We have to look ahead to the future, to the modern world and to the world of the future. This post-industrial information global world is unlike anything we have seen. And thus, the best method for solving moral problems is the method of intelligence. We need to develop in the world, I submit, particularly in the present moment, where there is a conflict and clash of civilizations and of religious traditions. We need to look beyond these intransigent, intolerant positions of the past and develop a new planetary humanism that transcends the ancient dogmas that divide people. Can we find common ground? That is the great question. Is it possible to find moral principles in which we can agree upon? It seems to me that people of goodwill, dedicated to realizing the best of which we're capable, need to work together to do this. And so the old battle lines and the battlegrounds of the past must be left behind us. We must be able to move to a new plateau in which morality is truly meaningful, in which it is global, and in which all human beings can participate. Thank you very much.